Aloha, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. My name is Andrea Nandoskar, and I'm the Education Program Manager at Historic Hawai Foundation. And thank you for being here for the second presentation of our 2021 Experts at the Cathedral Lecture Series. Mahalo to our event partner, Dr. Ralph Kam, the curator and coordinator of the Expert Series, on behalf of the Historic Preservation Program, Department of American Studies at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. HHF is so pleased to co-sponsor this year's series, which explores the changing interpretations of national historic landmarks. A few virtual housekeeping items before we begin. We are recording today's presentation, and the video replay will be available on our website either tomorrow or early next week. And we're also live streaming right now on YouTube and Facebook, where it will be available for viewing immediately afterwards. If you have questions during the talk and the Q&A session at the end, please type them in the chat box on the Zoom menu bar. We'll have time at the end to answer as many as we can. For those new to Historic Hawaii Foundation, we are a statewide nonprofit that helps people save historic places, sites that tell the stories of the multi-layered history of Hawaii. And we do this through education, advocacy, assistance, and protection of and for historic places. I would now like to warmly welcome today's presenter. Zita Choy has been affiliated with Iolani Palace for over 40 years. She took the 1977 docent class, served as a volunteer, and has since shared the stories of the palace and the ali'i with thousands of visitors. Zita joined the staff in 2003. Initially, she trained docents and worked as the palace registrar. She now serves as the palace historian. Zita has always had a love for history and a zest for research. Her extensive research helps to support a wide variety of palace programs and initiatives. During her free time, Zita volunteers at Washington Place and loves to read nonfiction history and biographies. Zita, welcome.
Mahalo, aloha avakea. Thank you for asking me to be part of this presentation this year. So interpretation. Interpretation can be formal. It can be informal. Let me get rid of this. Oops, sorry. Can be formal. It can be informal. Sorry.
Zita, is your camera on?
Oh, no.
Okay, thank you. We'd like to see you. Thank you, Zita.
So it can be formal, it can be informal. Do you have a black bar on the top that says mute and all that, or is that just on my screen? Yeah, okay. Interpretation, formal like tours, informal, like the kind of tour you would give your friends and family if you buy a new house. Brochures, labels, text panels, programs, and by programs I mean spoken programs or written programs, and sometimes for the same event, it's the same. So Iolani Palace was complete. So to see how Iolani Palace has changed with interpretation. Iolani Palace was completed in 1882. 80 years later, it was placed on the National Register. To see how it's changed, we need to go back. At the time that turned the heat of the earth, at the time when the heavens turned and changed, at the time, sorry, that's too far back, that's the Kumulipo. 1840, Governor Kekuanaoa was building a home for his daughter, Victoria Kamamalu. The following January, Kamehameha III moved the capital from Lahaina to Honolulu, looked around and saw this lovely new home and thought this would be a perfect place for him to live in and to work and to share. Kamehameha V changed the name from Hale'ali'i, or Royal House, to Iolani Palace, named for his brother Alexander Liholiho Iolani. Kamehameha III, the Fourth, the Fifth, and Lunalilo all used this two-story wooden frame structure home for living in and for entertaining. As they're entertaining local residents, they're entertaining visitors from across the globe. So I can imagine a lot of those individuals as they visit had questions, either directly to the king, to the king's staff, or maybe if they were too shy to ask while they were there, to ask other people later. So this is an informal type of interpretation. And it's everything that would be in the building probably. The Hawaiian collection, feather capes, kahili, pulo ulo'u, calabash, and the diplomatic gifts that were in the building. Kalakaua became king in 1874, took a look at this house that was then 30 years old, kind of old, didn't move in right away, told his brother-in-law, Governor Cleghorn, fix it up, I want to move when I come home. When he came home from his trip to Washington, D.C. in January of 1875, he found Governor Cleghorn had torn it down. We kind of think that this might have been a prearranged plan to induce the Legislative Assembly to give him money to build the new palace. The cornerstone of the new palace, our palace, was laid on his wife's 45th birthday. And you would think Kalakaua having a reputation as a party animal, that he was the first one to host an event here. Nope, it was Iolani. She hosted a luau for the Legislative Assembly. Now they're the ones that gave the money. So she was probably explaining everything that she could from the lanai as the luau progressed. The following January was Kalakaua's coronation. His coronation not only included the ceremony, but an unveiling of the Kamehameha statue, a dinner, a luau, hula, and a ball. Also an open house. On the afternoon of February 21st, from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., Iolani Palace was thrown open for inspection by the public. In every room, ladies were acting as ushers and, as the newspaper said, most politely described to our reporter all the noteworthy objects. This is kind of an informal interpretation. We do the same thing when we have open house. This is a photo taken during the two museums and the palace event. We have two volunteers over by the staircase waiting for visitors to show up on the second floor so they can explain the noteworthy objects that are in the second floor hall. Iolani took advantage of her community's curiosity about the palace and hosted a benefit to benefit Hansen's disease patients who were at the Kaka'ako Hospital and at the settlement on Molokai. You notice admission, 50 cents just to get onto the grounds. 50 cents in today's money is $14.40, which is roughly equivalent to the adult admission fee that we charged in 1999. So again, the newspaper stories about this event have individuals in the palace answering questions and describing things that were there. Informal interpretation. Kalakaua did a lot of entertaining in the dining room. After your meal, you might have been taken into the throne room by a member of the king's staff, the chamberlain, or the king himself, who would have spent time describing for you his collection of what visitors would call Hawaiian curiosities. These were things that had been used in daily life when Captain Cook arrived, that by the time Kalakaua became king were antiques and collector's items, plus his collection of feather cloaks, feather capes, and kahili. So depending upon how often the staff member would have done the tour, it could have been considered informal or a formal tour. Kalakaua died in 1991. His widow, Iolani, removed her property from the building, which meant when Lili Okalani began entertaining, she didn't have as much objects in the building to share with her guests and her visitors. Besides, for the first year, the court was in mourning for the death of her husband, and then the latter half of the year in mourning for the death of her husband. So there wasn't a lot of entertaining where she could be sharing with the community and with her visitors. Monarchy is overthrown. Government-owned furniture and artifacts and diplomatic gifts stayed. These artifacts would have been Iolani property and would not have been in the building. Portraits, government-owned property. Furniture, government-owned property. This furniture was repurposed and used for the Legislative Assembly. So portraits in the hallway, 1886 newspaper report, which is, we can use that as an interpretive resources, said, described all the portraits that were in the hallway. One of the portraits that was in the hallway moved to the legislative chamber. This is the wife of Kamehameha II, Kamamalu. By the time Governor McCarthy was inaugurated, the portrait had changed to the wife of Kamehameha III, Queen Kalama. So I imagine the governor, governor's staff, lieutenant governor, legislators, all had to be prepared to share what was in the building with their constituents and with anyone that might drop in and visit. So another style of informal interpretation. In addition to local residents, there were guests, not just guests of regular people, but VIPs. This is the Prince of Wales seated next to Prince Kawananakoa's widow, Abigail Campbell Kawananakoa. They're at Rocky Point, which is up at Punahou, for the Mission Centennial celebration. He just happened to be here for 36 hours when that happened. He also walked through Iolani Palace. And as he walked up the steps, he noticed Admiral Thomas and two of his German cousins. So I can imagine the governor and the governor's staff had to explain how come and why. Informal interpretation. In 1934, I'm missing a slide here, President Roosevelt visited Hawaii and he suggested that the throne room ought to be restored for use as a throne room when the Legislative Assembly wasn't in session. It was restored, dedicated on Kalakawa's birthday in 1938. So lots of stories in the newspaper, which is another form of interpretation. And then this photo is taken during World War II. I imagine these military folks that were guarding the throne, the crowns, the sword, and the scepter had to have information at the ready to answer any questions the people that walked into the building might have. After the restoration of the throne room, the staff had to do a quick switch when the gavel announced session closed. I had someone on my Kama'aina Sunday tour about 7-8 years ago that said he was responsible along with others in switching the throne room from Legislative Assembly room, House chamber to the throne room. This color photo is taken in the 1950s or 60s of the throne room. So then we had Back to the Future joint resolution in 1959 to restore the palace when the legislators moved out and the executive and legislative branches moved out. This is an example of the extra rooms that were added to the palace during that period of time. The Citizens Advisory Committee on the Hawaii State Complex, Capitol Complex, were asking for feedback. Where should the Capitol be? What should happen to the palace? Suggestions: office, a restaurant in the dining room, a museum, a parking lot. In the mid-1960s, the National Park Service did a historic American building survey of the palace. Significant interiors survey was done of the palace. This was a focus on the physical structure and the things that were in the building. So I want to go back to that parking lot idea. Roger Coriel and Governor Quinn, when they visited the palace in the 1980s, said about the parking lot, "No way!" I'm really glad the state didn't revisit this 1903 idea the territory had for expanding the palace. Junior League, who likes to do short-term special projects, realized, okay, we have a lot of idea about the building itself, but we need information about the people and the events. They took on a project, 99 of them, 3 years worth of research, and you notice they're looking at hard copies of the newspapers, and then they're typing cards on 5x7, information on 5x7 cards. This is the card I shared you earlier. So this could be interpretation, references for interpretation. What the Junior League what we did recently with the Junior League files is we digitized them. So if you go to our website, go to Visit Virtual Experiences and Resources, go to the Junior League files, and this is what will pop up. If you want to search, you need to use month, month, day, day, year, year in this box, or put in a subject in that box. And do not use diacriticals, because if you use diacriticals with Iolani or Kalakaua, nothing will pop up. I would suggest if you want to research a subject, use the subjects that are in that box. What you will then get are cards like this. This card has a number of different subjects: palace events, British lighting, palace grounds, guards, blue room, music, throne room, Kalakaua description, and Kapi Iolani. So you can read primary source information about what happened in the palace during the 19th century. This is information that the people that trained me and the docents that I have trained used to do their tours. The Junior League also hired Charles Peterson, an architectural historian. This is a photo of him with the first president of the Friends of Iolani Palace, Video Kalani Morris. His recommendation was that a watchdog group be formed to keep an eye on whatever the state decided to do with the palace. So the Friends of Iolani Palace was incorporated as a nonprofit on June 7th, 1966. This is a brochure that the Hawaii Visitors Bureau created during the Burns administration. So this is a passive form of interpretation. So this would be available to visitors that walked into the throne room during the 60s and early 70s. Restoration began, and while restoration was going on, to keep the community excited about what was going on, the Friends set up an exhibit in the middle bedroom on the second floor. They set up an exhibit at Ala Moana Shopping Center. For those of you that remember Ala Moana way before it was renovated, this might be the exhibit space just on the ocean level on the Mauka side, or it could be the exhibit space in what is now, I think, Old Navy, because there were rooms in the back that you could rent for exhibits and for meetings. Ida Ione is in the mu'umu'u with her back to the camera in this photo. She, for a time, was a tour guide in the throne room. In this particular photograph, she's doing a tour, a more formal tour for the Queen of Tonga, who visited in 1970. Iolani Luahini, at some point in the 1960s, was also a guide in the throne room when the legislature wasn't in session. Iolani Palace also hired Edward P. Alexander to create an interpretive plan for Iolani Palace. He had worked by then for over 30 years at Colonial Williamsburg. So you know his interpretive plan is going to focus on people, who they were and what kind of activities they did and how they worked and who they were. This is the plan that was used to create the tour that we began doing in 1978, the formal tour. But before you can do tours, you have to have docents. In 1975, a docent training class started. This is that class. They were required to do a research project, and then they began doing grounds tours, formal grounds tours, after the band concert on Fridays. The 1975 class trained the 1977 class to do those ground tours. And then together we were trained to do interior tours of the palace. While we were, let me back up one. Interior tours of the palace. During our entire training period, which lasted 11 months, it was always, if the Friends get the contract to manage the palace as a museum. They didn't want us to be disappointed if someone else got the contract. We did get the contract, and before we started doing tours, the palace was rededicated on March 31st, 1978. All the rooms were blessed by Reverend Akaka, and all the volunteers staff were also blessed. You notice the dark clouds? We were fearful that rain like we had last week might pour down and we might need to cancel this event. The program included information about the original palace, a little bit of information about the restoration, and then invited the crowd to walk around the exterior of the building to peek into the empty rooms. I need you to know that as the flag, the Hawaiian flag, went up for the first time over the palace all by itself since the overthrow of the monarchy, the Royal Hawaiian Band was playing Hawaii Pono'i. The flag was halfway up the mast, a rainbow appeared, and a misty rain began. It was real chicken skin. So we're doing empty palace tours. First challenge, landscape. Take away the visitor's fear, take away their apprehension, where you are in the building, where we're going next. And it could be simply as on this side is the King Suite of rooms, which we'll visit first. On the other side, the Queen Suite of rooms, which will follow. We were asked to consider tone because we were not given scripts. We were told develop your own tour, but we had an outline. Tone, are you happy? Are you sad? Are you introspective? Are you questioning? Are you challenging the visitors to stop and think about what they're hearing? Room introductions, when the rooms look like this, were very necessary. Our visitors would have no way of knowing this was the dining room unless we told them it was. Historic milestones and imaginative sketches are kind of combined. A historic milestone for the Blue Room might be Iolani's meeting with her cabinet in 1893. A historic milestone might be Iolani's arrest and imprisonment. Imaginative sketches, meals, balls, luau's outside. So look at the Junior League research, choose events you want to talk about, and embellish your tour using those stories. We were asked as we were developing our tour to imagine, and I still ask the volunteers when I train them, to imagine a descendant of a monarchist, a descendant of an annexationist, and a visitor, a clueless visitor, are all on the same tour. Inform and educate them all. And you do need them to know that almost every descendant of annexationists doesn't want to admit it, because they're not really particularly happy these days about their family history sometimes. One of the events that we hosted, actually we began hosting events beginning with, after we opened, we began hosting centennial events. We could not find the original cornerstone, nor could the territory in 1929. So we laid a centennial cornerstone. The spoken and written program included information about the original cornerstone. So this is a form of interpretation. August 10th, 1980 was a red letter day for the volunteers, the docents, because that's when we began installing furniture, like the chairs. The portraits weren't installed till October. So we went from empty rooms to rooms furnished like this. Although room furnished like this dining room was really slow. The dining room appeared like this in 1982. So a little bit at a time, because one of the challenges is finding the furniture that had left the palace, either in the hands of the private owners, Kalakala family and Lidi Okalani, and in the hands of the government. Because what could not be used as office furniture was frequently sold. Slowly but surely, things came back. Slowly but surely, objects were restored, and then it was installed. We were told very specifically, when furniture is added, you are not allowed to add minutes to your tour. Let the furniture be the background to your stories. 1984, as a way to expand our ability to do outreach to the community, we opened our palace shop. Notice I said shop, not gift store. Our palace shop had slides, postcards, history, nonfiction books about the monarchy period, and proprietary objects. The slides were proprietary. We started adding things like our Christmas ornaments and later jewelry based on architectural features that were in the palace. In addition to hosting regular visitors from all over the globe, our curator, Jim Bartels, may have given tours to VIP dignitaries, such as the Archbishop of Canterbury. In 2008, our docent, Yuki, gave a tour to Prince Akishino and his wife. And what absolutely delighted all of us is that we had put out an exhibit in the throne room with objects that are normally not on display. And the prince decided he was going to read the entire document. So he whipped out his glasses and started reading. And it looked as if his handler, who was keeping track of the time, was getting a little anxious. I don't have time to read that. And never mind, he wanted to take a look at a copy of a letter that had been sent to His Majesty, His Imperial Highness, the Emperor of Japan, wishing him a happy 36th birthday. School tours were developed in the 1980s. Of course, by now they don't match up with benchmarks and standards, so they have been revised. We have not really had a chance to implement them yet because of COVID and shutdown. We are on track to do that, though, sometime within the next year. More centennial events like Kalakaua's Jubilee celebration. His original birthday party lasted 2 weeks. Our Jubilee celebration lasted a week. And in every program, inside the program was in the interior of the program had copy from 19th century newspaper articles about what the original event was like. 93, 1993, and 1995. Sad centennials of the overthrow and of Lili Kalani's arrest and imprisonment by the first by the provisional government and then by the Republic of Hawaii. We put up black bunting, and the black bunting was not like what was put up at the time of the overthrow, but like what was put up at the palace when Kalakaua died. This text panel explains what was going on, so if you were not on a tour, you would know what was going on. This is a passive form of interpretation. The quilt, which includes information by Lili Kalani, biographical information, was installed at the time, the anniversary of her imprisonment on the second floor room. Birthday events included programs for Lili Kalani's birthday. Always, the MC is talking about the individual, giving a biography and talking about their support in the community of the art. Lili Kalani was especially enamored of children and children performing. So this is the Honolulu Boy Choir and the Keiki Hula Halau. More recently, for her birthday, the Hawaii Ponui Coalition has taken on the responsibility of celebrating her birthday with Onipa'a. Hawaii Air National Guard recreated the Royal Guard in 1963. Every year until last year, they have reviewed the Guard. The MC during this program speaks of the original Guard, and it's part of his script kind of includes, the Guard has awakened after a decades-long sleep and will be exiting Iolani Barracks to be reviewed in front of the palace. So in 1990, the Guard was reviewed. 2 guardsmen walked up to the front gate to post themselves there. Normally, guards are posted at all 4 gates. In 1990, this is Kukui Torch, the torch that burns at midday. This is a symbol of Kalakaua's reign. To the accompaniment of chanting, a Kukui torch was lit, and then a armored car, couldn't think of what to call it, an armored car accompanied by HPD officers on motorcycles brought the crown, sword, and scepter back to the palace from the Bishop Museum. They were chanted into the palace by Manu Boy. So here, 2 of John Lake's sons lit the Kukui Torch, which you can see here. Unfortunately, I don't have a colored photo of that. But the Kukui Torch, the Kukui light, is real short, and it is real, you have to be almost with your nose to it to be able to see it. But this program included information about the crown, sword, and scepter. 1990, that was the first evening tours. This is a more recent evening tours. You can see the long line, how popular it became. Evening tours like the interpretation that Kalakaua's friends did in 1883 included ladies in white, gentlemen in tuxedos, describing noteworthy things in the room and talking about the people that use the rooms. In 2005, we shifted it from a focus on just general palace history to Queen Iolani. In 2013, we included the second floor rooms. This is more formal interpretation. In 2006, we added audio tours, first in English, Hawaiian, and Japanese. English and Hawaiian because those are the two official languages of the state of Hawaii. And recently in 2000, so some of these languages were added in 2006, some of them, particularly Mandarin and Korean, added in 2018, a different type of interpretation. When there are events on the ground, if we are sponsoring or if someone else is sponsoring, we sometimes will have tables like this. This is our former education coordinator. For the Manu Oku event, we had activities for children and information about the palace grounds. We participated in the Missouri History Day. Our former curator and I went out there and same thing, information about the palace, an invitation to become a member, an invitation to visit with activities for children. Onipa'a, the Sunday before Labor Day, Ho'iponui Coalition. We have an open house format where guests are invited to walk through the first floor with volunteers in white, talking to them. Children and Youth Day, same type of format with activities in the basement. Sometimes when other groups host events on the grounds, the first floor and basement can be opened so we can share the history with their guests. This photo is of lieutenant governors from all across the country. Lieutenant Governor Iona was having them to dinner at Washington Place as part of their Hawaii conference. He had contracted with someone to do an ole kahea at the gate as they entered the front gate, and ole komo to invite them to come in, took a picture on the steps, and then they walked through the palace. They walked through the palace. They and we both got really frustrated because we didn't really have much time to say anything more than, this is Iolani Palace, built in 1882. This was a royal residence. Come back and visit sometime after your conference is over. In addition, we do outreach with other museums, so interpretation can go beyond our grounds and go beyond our building. This is a Tavernier painting that is part of our collection. This was loaned to the Crocker Museum in San Francisco when they did exhibit on Tavernier. Our reproduction gowns were exhibited at Hamilton Library and at Macy's. You notice this exhibit at Macy's. There's a text panel talking about the original gown, who Kapi'olani was and why she had it created. There is also an exhibit out at the airport. It is near what used to be gate 20, and I think it's now gate E5 and 6. So if you're out at the airport, coming or going, see if you can check that out. In addition, we have interpretation via our website. There are a lot of different opportunities here. So homepage, visit page, about page is history. There is historical information about the rooms and the grounds. Join and support so you can become a member and donate. Palace collections are about things that are either on display or are in our storage area. Education tab includes activities that you can download, teachers and families can download. Events right now, probably this one will be there or a link to that one. Contact us is an ability to ask us questions, and information are links to other sites and other organizations that have information about the monarchy period. One of the ones I refer to people often is the link to Hamilton Library's annexation document. Our Facebook page features historic posts and information about upcoming events. Our Instagram is a complement to our Facebook page, which includes information. It's Instagram. One of the things we did for Instagram, I think 3 years ago, was a series of 60-second recordings about the portraits that are in the hallway. So if you go to our Instagram page, or if you go to we just need to go to our visit and virtual page, you can visit those posts. So virtual experiences. Here you have a virtual tour, no captions, no audio. You can do 360s in the rooms and see all the rooms and go beyond the ropes. You can't go beyond when you are on a audio tour or docent-led tour. A grounds tour that is GPS keyed, the portrait series I just mentioned, the Namo Olelo lecture series, which started in 2018 and extended to 2019 on such topics as Iolani's trip to England, Royal Orders, the Royal Order of Oceania, and one I found totally fascinating because Kalakaua was really interested in science was the microbiotic realm. This was a doctor who has studied microbes, and she was telling us the Hawaiians knew something was wrong when the lo'i changed shape or if there were bubbles, and they knew how to fix it. Even they didn't know what was causing it, they knew how to fix it. This link also allows you to watch the King's Noble Vision, which is around a 13-minute film that is also showed in our video theater. So guests, if they aren't able to come on a tour for some reason, especially in the past before social distancing and all of that, could watch the video and learn about the palace. We recently launched specialty tours. These are limited to 4 guests maximum. Doesn't matter whether we are social distancing and COVID related, these tours will not go up any higher than that because they include going beyond the ropes. The Chamberlain's tour is given from the viewpoint of a Chamberlain that worked for the king, and our docents are in period costume. Hawaii's royal connection to Japan focuses on information about Kalakaua's trip to Japan and immigration to Hawaii, and brings you up to the present with guests from Japan. The White Glove Tour is a tour that takes you up into the attic. So you can learn about collections management and see some of our storage spaces in the attic. You're given white gloves so you can be taught how to properly handle historic objects, or even your precious family objects. If you become a member, you will receive invitations to our virtual tours. Our virtual tour that we did in December was a 30-minute or 20-minute tour of the palace. Not all the rooms, just some of the rooms with a focus on Iolani. This took place of our evening tours, which we had to cancel because of COVID. We're planning another virtual tour later this month. So if you aren't already a member, I'd like to invite you to become a member so you can attend that tour. To make reservations, to become a member, or to make a donation, please visit our website, iolanipalace.org. And I meant to put a mahalo for listening slide next. Mahalo. Now, questions. I'm going to stop sharing.
Zita, thank you. That was a feast of history and really well done. I can start us off with some questions, but I invite everyone to type in any questions you have for Zita into the chat and we will address those. So a couple of questions. I know there's been a lot done over the last few years and even prior to that with the translation of Hawaiian language newspapers. And I wondered how, if at all, that has altered or informed any of the interpretation.
We share information with our volunteers, and we have always encouraged them to share first-person accounts of the palace. And what I expect them to do if they are in the throne room or another room, instead of saying, Kalaka, if you had attended a ball, do a specific ball, quote from someone who was there, quote from someone who talked about it. So our challenge with the Hawaiian language newspapers is that we do have staff members who are fluent in Hawaiian, but they don't necessarily have time to work with us to translate it. I am trying to become fluent in Hawaiian. So we're working on that. And we do have a Puakea Nogelmeyer was our first Hawaiian language docent. And our Keahi Davis, who also works at the Judiciary History Center, is also fluent in Hawaiian and can do a Hawaiian language tour by special request. It was easier before COVID, but that's the kind of thing that can happen.
Excellent, thank you. We have a question from Tori.
Vaitala?
Yes, I believe so. Having a little trouble seeing the full name on my screen.
I saw it kind of pop up in the chat.
Oh, okay. I've noticed, this is the question, I've noticed on the Iolani Palace social media posts, some of the images are not fully cited and leave her asking who or what is pictured. When was a photograph taken and from what collection is the image from? Is there a plan to fully cite images used by the palace? Was the question.
I am doing the historic posts, and if it's a Hawaii State Archives image, I put it in my draft. If it's from another site, I usually put it in my draft. I have been putting it in my draft. Becker Communications is responsible for deciding which post to create, and they usually do edits on it. So Pomai and I, who are responsible for working with them, I will make sure that I have the sites going forward for everything. And I will make sure that we work with Becker to make sure if I have lifted a post from somebody else's website, which I did for a February post, that it is included along with the link in the website post. And I'm not, I just think that's valuable, because when I started doing the posts, some of them did not want. I said, why are you giving us the sites? Because I need to know where the information came from in case somebody asks. So we'll work on that. Thank you. Thank you, Tori.
Thank you, Zita. Another question from our audience. Did families who returned furniture donate it to the palace or loan it?
Okay, museums, as a general rule, do not like loans. Families that we have donations, we have loans. Our loans are from the state of Hawaii, over 200 pieces. We have loans from Bishop Museum, the thrones, a crown, sword, scepter, and several other pieces. We also have loans from the Honolulu Museum of Art. Museums generally do not like loans because that makes you responsible for transportation and taking care of it when it is here. We love our lenders because these are important items for us to share the history with people. We as an organization have never had money to buy artifacts from people. We basically struggle sometimes to find money to ship it to us and to restore it. And for furniture, it has to be fumigated before it can go into the building, because we don't like to introduce any critters to the stuff that's in the building, either the artifacts or to the building itself.
Yes, thank you, Zita. And I want to come back and ask you a question about the bees a little bit later, but before that,
okay.
You're talking about critters. We have a question from David, who's a student at Mid-Pacific Institute, and he is saying that this is his first engagement. He's working on a global politics project, which sounds really great. And his topic is preserving cultural sites from urban development, which is an interesting for you to comment on some insight on maybe some of the challenges that you face preserving and interpreting sites that are part of an urban landscape.
The major challenge for us, we are a state-owned building. We have a lease to manage it for the state. Our challenge is primarily financial. What happens when you need to fix the roof? But I think his best opportunity would be to talk to you and your organization and to talk to some of the people you have worked with to preserve other buildings that are in this urban landscape. Because the challenge for a lot of them has to do with finances more than anything else. A lot of people see the need to preserve it. A lot of communities want to preserve it, but the finances sometimes get in the way. A major example of that for Hawaii was the Alexander Young Hotel, which is where Tamarind Square is now downtown. It was a national landmark, but it was torn down to be replaced by a commercial building.
Thank you, Zita. David, do reach out to us. I think you may have reached out to ask another question recently, so we can definitely chat about that. Another question is, has there been opposition or pushback over the time that you have been doing the tours over the decades to any of the interpretation?
Some of our volunteers aren't as successful as doing a balanced tour as we would wish them to be. So there are some people that get upset that it's not more focused on Lady Okalani and how dare they overthrow her. I did a balanced tour one day, and shortly before I was ready to be introduced for my second tour, a man walked up to me as he was exiting and said, you know, you really shouldn't be talking about the United States as, you know, I didn't say the United States overthrew the Queen. I didn't even really talk about that. But his attitude was, you really should more focus on how blessed you are as a community that you were annexed, because where would you have been in 1941 if the United States wasn't here? And I was not fast enough on the uptake. I should have told him if the United States wasn't here, it wouldn't have happened. So most of our visitors are pleased that it is balanced, but our volunteers need to be sensitive to the feelings of both sides of the story and try to answer questions in a respectful manner. It can be real scary sometimes because many of you know and have read Letters to the Editor by Ken Conklin. He was on my tour one Kama'aina Sunday, and he didn't say anything, he didn't ask anything. So,
Can you elaborate a little more on that for those who aren't familiar?
Ken Conklin is an ardent annexationist and thinks it's the best thing that ever happened to Hawaii. And in the past, he did write a lot of letters to the editor about it, especially when there were events about Lady Okalani and about the overthrow and about how sorrowful it was for the Hawaiian community to lose their sovereignty, to lose their ability to participate in government, to lose their ability to speak their language. So yeah.
Thank you, Zita. So in line with what you were just expressing, and I'm not sure if you attended last week's lecture where Hanako Wakatsuki had kind of given us the context for a model of interpretation called JEDI, which is justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, a model of interpretation. I mean, I think you've partially answered this. Does the palace align with that model in your view, or is there still work to be done, or is it pretty? You said it was balanced, so I feel like you would agree that you're doing that. But if you have any additional thoughts on that model and whether the palace has additional work to do in those areas.
I think the additional work that I can do as palace historian is to make sure our volunteers, especially the docents, have the information they need to be able to answer the questions. And I saw in the chat there was a comment about, shouldn't you be telling more information about how the US Navy helped with the overthrow? The Hawaiian minister, not the Hawaiian minister, in violation of diplomatic protocol, the American minister asked the US Navy ship that was in port to land US Marines to protect American lives and property at the time of the overthrow. American lives and property were never in jeopardy. He got into major trouble with the State Department for that activity. And this gives a lot of people the impression that the US military participated in the overthrow. And they were really just there as a physical presence, which may have intimidated Lady Okalani's supporters somewhat. So you've got a lot of different issues there going on. And I'd like to recommend that anyone that is really interested in examining that and getting first-person information about that, go to the Hamilton Library website, go to annexation documents, go to the Blount report. He was a commissioner sent out by President Cleveland to interview people, interviewed annexationists, interviewed monarchs, interviewed hundreds of people in the community about what they saw and what they experienced. So there's lots of different opinions, and diversity and exclusion. Inclusion includes everybody's viewpoint. I read a science fiction story one time where a intelligent non-human society event, the truth would only be known if everyone who participated or witnessed or was affected by an event spoke their piece. So my great-grandfather should have been asked. He was a butcher on Maui. And if he wasn't asked, we don't know what his opinion was. We don't know what changed for his business at the time of the overthrow. So it's something that, yeah, we need to make sure that the docents have the resources they need to be able to answer the questions.
Thank you, Zita. I think that's something really important as we navigate through this expert series this year on interpretation and changing interpretation, is that it's not tied up in a neat little bow, and that the voices are voices of everyone who's been part of that experience, which is it's a constantly evolving interpretation that attempts to bring in as many viewpoints and facets as possible.
One of our changes occurred when Noinoi Silva discovered the annexation petitions that were in the National Archives. So that was some major change for some of our volunteers.
Switching gears a little, can you give us, has the pandemic and loss of tourism revenue inspired a new vision for the role of the palace going forward? Uh-oh, she's gone. Thank you, Zita. You don't have a door to close.
I don't have a door to close. So the pandemic has, we used to be open 6 days a week. We're now open 4. We used to have docent-led tours every 15 minutes. When we are offering them, they're every half an hour. We used to have audio tours every 10 minutes. Now I think they're every 15. Our visitor count and our income has dropped considerably. We are also working on the technology to be able to do more virtual tours, both virtual tours that will be posted on our website and virtual tours that will be available like to our members only. Our technology challenge is because of the age of the palace and because of the thickness of the building and because we have to work with the State Office of Historic Preservation, it creates challenges about what we can put in and what we can put up. As a matter of fact, we went to audio tours. Our audio tour vendor put the labels on the wall. And Historic Preservation and us and Glenn Mason, who we work with in architectural history, not on the wall, they're on tables. So it creates a challenge for some of the ways we are able to do interpretation.
And are you receiving a lot of interest locally, because a lot is virtual now, from our kama'aina, and thinking about how the palace is integrated into our own community and what role it could serve in addition to, offering the tours and the history?
We are getting we did an outreach to Kama'aina when we first reopened. We reduced Kama'aina have a much lower price than visitors from around the globe. And we lost staff, so it's a much smaller staff than we had before. So virtual reality will take a little bit more time to implement.
Absolutely. Finally, what's the latest update on the palace bees?
They were gone, they came back. They ate through the synthetic, whatever it was that was covering the hookahs where the bees were. So if you want more information about that, more specifically, you're going to have to talk to Paula. But Hawaii Tourism Authority gave us some money to restore both the Coronation Pavilion and to deal with the bees that came back. They wanted to come home. Can't blame them.
Finally, I know that you had offered classes. This goes back several years. I'm not really sure what you do. I know the pandemic is happening, but there were classes that you were offering about the history to the public, which was like a series of classes that people would register for. Are you doing anything like that or have anything like that in the future when we're able to gather or virtually for people who are interested to learn more about the museum, interpretation, and the general history of the palace.
When I was doing docent training, we did a royal history class, which was open to anyone and everyone, whether you wanted to be a docent or not. And then docent training, which was specific training so you could become a docent. Our curator of education and development, who resigned last fall, was shifting it to just a docent training class. She has resigned, so I am working with Cindy, our visitor services manager. We are working on planning a class this summer, which will be a virtual class. You will be doing a lot of studying and reading on your own. There will be some webinars where we will be asking you to do some reading and then interacting with each other and with me primarily. And any one of those people that goes through that training is welcome to train to become a docent as well. So
that's fantastic.
Keep an eye on our website. We do members newsletters, so you can get it from there, and we will be posting it on our Facebook page.
That sounds wonderful. Thank you, Zita. And thank you so much for sharing. You are such a resource and jewel for the history, and clearly it's your passion. We're very grateful that you could be with us today to share more. And everyone, this is being recorded, so Zita's the contact information and everything in one of her slides will be part of the presentation. And I want to thank everyone for joining us today. We hope that you enjoyed today's presentation. I would like to thank my colleague, Michelle Kisek, who's been providing technical support. I want to invite everyone to join us next Thursday, February 11th at noon for the third experts lecture on Kalaupapa National Historical Park with cultural anthropologist Iolani McGuire and historian Christopher Johnson. I'd also like to invite you, we still have some spaces, though we have had a really good response to the Harold Lyon Arboretum collaborative event that will take place on February 17th at 4:30. It's called Plants and Place, and it will explore the cultural history and ethnobotany of Lyon Arboretum and Manoa Valley. You can register for these virtual events and sign up for our HHF e-newsletter at historichawaii.org. If you would like to support HHF and our work, and I hope you will consider that, there are many ways to do that, and I invite you to visit the Join Us section at historichawaii.org to learn more. And finally, just wishing everyone really continued good health. Hopefully you are in good health and inspired spirits. And ahui ho until we meet again. Thank you again, and thank you to Ralph, to Dr. Ralph Kam.
Mahalo.
Aloha. Mahalo,
Mahalo,
Zita.
everyone. Hope
Bye,
to see you
everyone.
visiting the palace soon.
Yes,
And
let's
then
support our
when it
palace.
opens up more again, please come back. Please come volunteer.